Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with Tony Gennaro. He's a rock and roll drummer, public
What's my
speaker.
name? What's my name?
I'm sorry, Sandy Gennaro. Am I right? God, I have a thing with names.
Yes,
I
you are.
always
Sandy like the beat.
Exactly. Well,
That's
welcome.
okay.
I hope you don't change your mind and leave now.
No, I won't, John. I mean, listen, that's why they put erasers on pencils.
Okay. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for being here. Ringo Starr taught me how to play drums. He doesn't know it, but who taught you how to play drums?
Ringo Starr taught me how to play drums.
Yeah, but you probably met him, right?
Well, I didn't meet him, but I have his autograph. I did see him live.
How does that work?
I have his autograph, but between Ringo and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin and the Stones drummer and a lot of drummers influenced me, but Ringo was the very first, and it's still my favorite drummer ever.
Let's talk about that because you and I are about the same age. We were teenagers when the Beatles stormed onto the scene. What was it about that moment in history, in music history, that got your attention? Why the drums?
Why the drums? Well, I received a drum for Christmas when I was 2.5 years old. And as a matter of fact, oh no, I have it upstairs. I still have that drum upstairs in my office. And but my dad played big band music around the house. My older sisters played 50s music around the house, and I just fell in love with that drum. And I was able to hit something with sticks and not get hollered at by my mother. And
was that an aggression thing? Was that an aggression thing?
I don't think it was an aggression thing. I was 2.5 years old. It was more like a fun thing.
Okay.
I was having fun. I was having fun hearing music, and I resonated with rhythm, no matter what song, no matter what style of music was playing on the record player. And then I never seen a drummer live until that moment, February 9th, 1964, when the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan, and my life was changed, right? Not changed, but I knew exactly what I was going to do, especially when I saw how the girls were reacting to a rock and roll band.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go.
And I went, man, I'm not sure what's going on there, but I want part of that situation. So
did you take lessons or did you teach yourself? How did you actually learn?
At the very beginning, I learned principally. I learned by listening and emulating drummers on record. In other words, I used to have what they call a Victrola.
Yeah.
And it was with the 45 with the little disc and a 4-inch speaker. This is before headphones.
Oh man!
And I put my ear to the speaker and try to copy what Ringo or Charlie Watts or the Stones or Led Zeppelin, John Bonham try to copy. And then my mother bought me lessons once a week, just learn the basics, quarter note, double stroke roll or whatever. But principally, I learned on the job. In other words, I got into a band. The band had to learn certain songs. I had to learn the drumming in those songs. And and the rest is history, basically.
I mean, I did the same thing. My drums were basically on my bed. I had a practice pad. The bolsters were the tom, the floor tom, the hi-hat, and the bass drum was my foot. So my parents on the first floor were just, at least they knew where I was, right?
Right. Well, I rehearsed down in my finished basement at my house in Staten Island. And my mother was very supportive. She never told me to stop, but she used to click the light on at the top of the stairs, on and off downstairs, to signal when dinner was ready.
Right.
And I had to do my homework first, and then I can go down and play until people went to bed.
So how old were you when you got into your first band?
When I started playing, I got my first drum set at 14, and I probably got in my first band maybe about 6 months after that.
Wow. So, and you never looked back?
I never looked back after that.
Did you know? So you knew that's what you wanted to do with your life, period.
When the Ed Sullivan show was over, I went to bed knowing what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I scotch taped the picture on my mirror in the bathroom mirror, the mirror in my bathroom at home, and the picture was of a drummer from the drummer's eye view, with the audience and the band, the backs of the band and the crowd or whatever. And I scotch taped that picture on my bathroom mirror, and I said to myself, "That's going to be you, Sandy." I spoke in the second person. "That's going to be you someday, Sandy." And I received that in spirit. I knew what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life at age 14. And I never looked back.
At what point did you know, though, that you were good?
Well, I never really said to myself, "You know what, Sandy, you're really good." I just started dressing like a rock star. I started putting posters on my wall of my favorite bands, of the Beatles, Ringo, whatever. And then I started playing at a high school and a little neighborhood band, actually playing for backyard parties, high school graduations. But I knew my band was good, but I never said to myself, "Sandy, you're a really good drummer," because I'm still at 73, going to be 74 years old next month. I'm still learning. I'm still learning about, especially with at the advent of new technology or whatever. So you never stop learning.
Well, I started playing jazz drums a while ago, and I stumbled onto it because my son James is a drummer and professional, and we were at an open mic, and I asked him if he was going to go up and play, and he said no, and I said, "Well, I am," and I go swaggering up there as if I really knew what I was going to do, what I was doing, and they called something that was 4/4 medium swing. I could do that, and then a couple of horn players got up. And I found out later they just played a gig at the Kennedy Center. So I'm in over my head and I don't know it. So they call a song, they count it down, they're flying. I'm still taxiing, right? So you know you're in trouble when the house drummer goes, "I'll take over." So here I am trying to switch sticks with him. And so I didn't know anything about jazz drumming. And I found that rock and roll, I mean, you can make it as complex as you want it to be, but it's basically 2 and 4, and then just, keep going forward. Jazz is very complex. The learning curve is vertical. So my question is, have you tried jazz as well? Do you do all the different types of drumming?
I wear several different hats when it comes to under the rock and roll umbrella. Because Bo Diddley is a lot different than Cyndi Lauper, is a lot different than Joan Jett, is a lot different than the Monkees under the rock and roll umbrella. So I had to be a chameleon. But you know what? I taught for 27 years at a drum school, a music school in Manhattan called The Collective. And once in a while, a drummer used to come to me, a beginning drummer, and to make his knowledge a little bit more well-rounded, I have some lessons that have the swing ride. So I taught the very basic of jazz just to see if the student would like it. And then if they liked it and wanted more in-depth jazz instruction, I would refer another teacher at the Collective that was specialized in jazz. But even Latin music, just the very basic Latin kind of vibe. But then you want more Latin. I want to be a Latin drummer. I want to play with Tito Puente. Okay, well, I have to give you to another teacher, whatever. But in the rock umbrella, I'm pretty diverse.
Okay, well, you mentioned Bo Diddley, and I want to take a minute to this. I mean, he was a legend, and you had the privilege of playing with him. I'm going to show a short clip, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So let me. Okay. This is a very low budget operation, Sandy, and let me just make sure that I do it right here. I need to go to the right spot and see if I can roll the videotape. Yes. All right. Hold on. Okay, well, we got the idea there. Let me bring you back on. Hold on. There you are. Talk about that moment. What was that like?
That was at BB King's in New York City, and it's not in existence anymore. But it used to be on 42nd Street in New York City. And Bo Diddley was not one to introduce the band on stage by name, but he wanted to highlight each member of the band. So when that was his way of highlighting me, was he would come over during the encore where I would be playing the Bo Diddley beat, donk 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 donk, and then he would come up on the riser and I would break it down and keep the bass drum going, and he would start a rhythm and I would enhance the rhythm and we'd do a call and answer. But he knew the spotlight followed him everywhere on that stage. That's why at times he went over to the guitar player, he went over to the bass player. So the spotlight followed him around the stage, and that was his way of introducing the band. But he was, if you hold on a second, I gave him some sticks. Originally, he fished through my stick bag to get a pair of sticks, and he after a gig, the first time he did it, he goes, "Hey Sandy, can you? I have kind of arthritic." He goes, "I'm very good friends with arthritis." He has arthritis in his hands, and he says, "Can you get me a big fat pair of sticks that so I can easily hold them?" So I gave him a pair of sticks. He loved them, and then he said, "Sandy, do you mind if I take these home?" I gave him 2 pairs. I go, "Bo, they're your sticks, man." He took them home. And he brings these sticks back. He goes, "This will help me hold on to them." And these are the actual Bo Diddley sticks. They're big, fat sticks. And he actually put a little sword thing. So when he put his hands through it, he can grip the sticks a little bit better. And this is what he did. This is Bo Diddley's creation. And when he passed away, I was lucky enough, or not, I don't believe in luck, but I was fortunate enough in playing about the last 5 years of Bo Diddley's life. I did actually play his last gig ever. And then he had a stroke and he got sick and he couldn't perform anymore. But I was at his funeral and I asked his family, I said, "I just want one thing of Bo's, and is that pair of sticks." So these are Bo's. These are my little memory. And if you hold on one more second.
This is a very informal conversation. I love it this way. Oh my God, look at that. I'm gonna take you full screen.
There's a picture I took of Bo holding. Hey Sandy, bring your camera in the dressing room. And he took a picture of, and there's Bo's arthritis hands holding those drums.
This is going to
classic. He was just.
I'll say. I mean those are candidates for the Smithsonian, sir.
Absolutely
wonderful. Well, since we're going down memory lane, I want to show something else. It's going to take a minute to set up. Hold on. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to go to this and start that and hit play, and it'll speak for itself.
Okay. Gotta get a full house. Must be raining. You're in a super mood tonight. We thought we'd play a section of that code is too much. Of Stump the Band. Anybody have any song? Somebody in our orchestra will. Okay, we'll start with this gentleman here. All right. Yes. You are. Hold on. No, I didn't mean that because. Oh, no. No, I didn't mean that because of the hair. I just did. Gentlemen. You are.
Sandy Gennaro.
Where are you from?
New York City.
What do you do back there?
Well, we're living out here now. We're living here.
Well, what do you do here? You play music?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wasn't kidding you here because my son wears his hair this long. I wish I could wear my hair that long. I used to have it all the way down my back. Not on my head, just all the way down my back. Remember? Old joke, but this is an old show. What's the name of the song?
Tweezers of Your Love.
You're putting me on. Tweezers?
Tweezers of Your Love.
Tweezers of Your Love.
Tweezers of your love. Tweezers of your love. It's not my key. Oh.
That coat's not in your size, but that doesn't make any difference. They don't know that. Can you give us a shot of that?
Yep, for the band, it's this is for the benefit of the band. It's G, A minor, D, G.
No, you see, you don't understand. You're talking to our guys. You say, no, you know, you say. See, you don't understand. These guys don't read. So when you say all that G, A minor, and so forth, in other words, they could pick that up.
I suppose they're union.
Okay. No, you don't understand. None of these guys are union either. In fact, we don't even know who these guys are. They just know.
Through the kitchen.
Give them that chord arrangement again.
G, A minor, D, G, like a country song, like one. Dun, dun.
Okay.
I got a thorn stuck in my foot and how it hurts, man. I got it while walking barefoot in the rain. Doctor ain't no good, it just won't help me. I need the trees of love to ease my pain. I went down to Memphis, down to Alabama, and met a young girl named Diana. Everybody knows she's as sweet as she can be. I then I came and Memphis down to Alabama. I really loved that girl. I told her all about it. Couldn't understand why she said this thing to me.
Let me tell you what you think. Hey, you like that? See, that was great, guys. Right on. See, that wasn't fair. You wrote that, right? They wouldn't know that, you see. Okay, we've got dinner for four at a very nice restaurant here in Los Angeles called the Greenhouse. You got some friends with you? No, just me and my wife. Wasn't she friendly? Very good. Folks, pick up two people. Thank you. Okay, somebody else here?
That was fun. That was a lot of fun. So talk about the backstory on that one.
Well, there was not really a backstory. I was a big fan of Johnny Carson for as long as I can remember. Even when I was in Staten Island, you know, as growing up. This happened in 1976. So even prior to that, this is before I'd done anything of note musically. I was playing the drums or whatever. But I moved to LA in 1976 to get my first big break in the music business. And when I was home in Staten Island, I used to dream about being on Carson. And whenever you played Stump the Band, he played that game about every week and a half or 2 weeks. And I said to myself, laying in bed before I went to bed, I said, man, if I was ever in LA and I went to see the Tonight Show, and the night that I went, he actually played Stump the Band and he picked me or whatever, I know exactly what song I would sing because I wrote the song. And anyway, so I fell asleep.
Got to wait till the live stream catches up here. You froze and went away on us. There you are.
Okay, so I went to the show and I moved to LA to get my first big break, and they sat me in the aisle, and there it was.
Did they know you were? Did they know you were going to say something, or I mean, was that pre-planned?
It wasn't pre-planned, but I was waiting online outside the theater, NBC Studios, and the associate producer came out prior and said, "Listen, tonight we're going on a megaphone. Tonight we're going to play Stump the Band. Anybody got a funny song? Step out of line." So I stepped out of line. There was about 12 of us that stepped out of line. We each sang our song briefly in the parking lot, basically outside the theater. And then he said to me, stand on the side. He chose 3 to stand on the side. We were ushered in first, and he sat me on the 3rd row aisle. And then Carson comes out 10 minutes before air, and the associate producer points out the 3 songs and so Carson knew, but it seemed like it was ad-libbed, and part of it was ad-libbed. I mean, who's to say the night that I went, he would play Stump the Band, because he didn't play it every single night. So it was basically like a synchronicity kind of thing, serendipitous kind of thing. But
did anything come of it? I mean, did that help your career at all, or was it just a one?
No, it didn't help my career at all, because I still was without the big gig that I was searching for, whatever. But when I was with Lauper, 8 years later, 1984, now we're going into the stage door, and the first time Lauper and the band appeared on the Tonight Show, and the Carson comes in the dressing room, the green room, and introduces himself. And he came in, and I gave him a pair of drumsticks because I heard he was a hobby drummer.
He's a drummer, yeah.
Yeah, I said, Johnny, do you remember being on Stump the Band about 8 years ago? He goes, oh, we had a lot of people on Stump the Band. He goes, what song did you sing? And I said, it's a song that I wrote called Tweezers of Your Love. And he goes, are you the guy that gave the chords to the band? And I said, yeah. He goes, man, you're the only guy that gave the chords to the band. And they still didn't guess the song. But it was really, really a cool moment. And then we were on Cyndi Lauper was on Carson again about maybe 6 months later, doing 2 other songs. And then when Jay Leno hosted the Tonight Show, I was on there with the Monkees. So be careful what you wish for, because not only besides Stump the Band, I was on Carson 3 other times. So it was awesome. He's still my favorite comedian of all time. He was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Whew. I mean, there's so much to talk about. So what was the big break? How did you get the big break?
Well, that's quite a lengthy story, but my first big break happened in New York. I was in LA, and I befriended a favorite drummer of mine named Carmine Appice. He played with Vanilla Fudge back in New York. But when I met him in LA, became friends with him in LA, he played with Ozzy Osbourne and Ted Nugent and all that. He was a superstar drummer. And I finally got an audition with Rod Stewart. And the audition was held in a studio with all the instruments provided, drums included. And I decided, because I wanted that audition to be perfect, I brought my own drum set and made Rod Stewart wait about 30 minutes while I set up my drum set, whereas the drum set already provided. So I didn't get the gig. I was just really depressed. I told Carmine about it, and he said, don't worry, Sandy, use my name as a reference, send out some resumes, use my whatever. And then I told Carmine, I said, Carmine, I don't think they found somebody. Rod found somebody yet. And he goes, you got Rod's management's number? So I gave him Rod's management's number. He goes down and gets the gig. He goes, Mr. Superstar drummer.
He got the gig.
Carmine got the gig with Rod Stewart, and he played on like 7 records, did multiple tours. He co-wrote the song "Do You Think I'm Sexy?" He wrote a testimonial in my book, Carmine did, about, hey, thank you for turning me on to the biggest gig of my life. You know, so it was, so anyway, I sent out resumes. Long story short, one of the resumes was to Peter Grant, the manager of Led Zeppelin, because I sent the resume to 50 managers of bands that I really liked. Peter Grant, all Led Zeppelin's mail, and Peter Grant goes to their record label in New York City to be forwarded to England, where they were based. Well, my resume went to Swan Song Records in New York City. It ended up on the attorney for Led Zeppelin and ran the label. His name was Steve Weiss, Stevens H. Weiss, I believe his name was. And this is the way what I call God energy. This is no accident. This is all by design. My resume ends up in front of Steve Weiss, his name is not even on it. It never got forwarded to England, the resume. He opens the resume, and he's looking for a drummer right at that point in time, because he's putting a band together around Michael Bolton, who later became Michael Bolton. This was the first, yeah. So I need a drum. He's shopping Michael's songs around labels, around record companies in New York City, to try to get Michael a group record deal. So anyway, Steve Weiss needs a drummer, because now record companies are getting back to him. Hey, we want to see this band. This is before Michael became Michael Bolton. So record companies are getting back to Steve Weiss. Hey, we want to see this band. We like the material. And so Steve Weiss, my resume is on Steve Weiss's desk. He opens it, and there's Carmine's name. Well, the coincidence, and there's no coincidence, the serendipitous situation here is that Steve Weiss used to be the attorney for Carmine's first band, or one of his first bands, the Vanilla Fudge. So he knows Carmine personally, sees his name. Carmine vouches for me. The next call I get is in LA. Hey, do you want to fly to New York to audition for this band? And I ended up flying to New York. I got the gig, and the band was called Blackjack.
How old were you at the time?
I was about 26.
Okay.
26
okay.
years old. It came kind of late, you know, in the MTV window. 26, the window's starting to close, you know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, I just got to mention that the band Blackjack had not only Michael Bolton, became Michael Bolton. This is before he became a solo artist. This is his first like professional record deal, really.
Mhm.
And then Bruce Kulick was the guitar player who went on to play with Meatloaf prior to that, and then went on to play with Billy Squier and Kiss for 10 years when they took the makeup off. And then Jimmy Haslip, who was the bass player in Blackjack, he went on to be the musical director for a jazz rock band called the Yellow Jackets, and he won a Grammy. So we all went on to do other significant stuff in the music business, but that was my first big break.
And everything up until that point was gigging and just keep, you know, trying to get your name out there and trying to make it. There was, you know,
That's
it was always music.
But it was very, very close for me throwing the drumsticks in the fireplace because, you know, when I was in LA, my original relationship was falling apart. I barely had 4 figures in the bank. I just blew what I thought was the biggest audition of my life. And the bad wolf, you know, you talk about the good wolf and the bad wolf. Which wolf do you feed as far as good thoughts and bad thoughts? Well, the bad wolf was talking really, really loud. Go home, you loser. Your relationship is falling apart, blah, blah, blah. But I stayed with me because I didn't have a plan B, John. You know what I mean? So I said, well, I got to do this or I'm going to work at Home Depot or something, you know? So I went ahead and forged ahead and it all worked out. That's when tenacity comes in.
Yeah. Okay. We do have a question from the chat from Patrick Noonan who asks, have you ever worked with John Lilly from the Hooters?
No. I know a couple of members of the Hooters worked on Cyndi's first record. I think Eric Brazilian and you know, I'm really apologize to the other guy that I can't remember. And I'm still friends with the drummer, David. I can't pronounce his last name, but the drummer in the Hooters.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, so no, I'm not familiar with John Lilly.
Okay.
What did he? Okay.
So talk about the Cyndi Lauper thing was a kind of a serendipitous kind of thing too, right?
Yes, basically it was very serendipitous. I was in 1981. I was playing a really hot concert in New Haven, Connecticut, and we were all in a hurry to get on the bus. We had a long overnight drive, and there was this guy in the doorway. Everybody was on the bus. I was the last one scurrying around the dressing room, and he was in the doorway to see the drummer and had a camera and a pen. Excuse me. And I engaged him because I was flattered.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, he was there with a camera and a pen standing in the doorway, and I'm out of the corner of my eye, and he's got a camera and a pen, and I was in a really big hurry. I could have just went, "Hey, buddy, I'm in a hurry. I can't talk to you now. I got to get on the bus." My road managers yell at me, but I engaged him because I was flattered that he was there to see the drummer, and everybody else was on the bus. Right. So I engaged him. He asked me for an autograph and a picture. I signed. His name was Dave. I signed his autograph, and he at that point he asked me if I could, can you turn me on to a gig in New York City, Sandy? I'm a bass player here in Connecticut. And I went, well, I can't recommend you unless I hear you play, Dave. So here's my card. Send me a cassette of your playing and I'll see what I can do. He sent me, he was very appreciative. I went on the bus, got home from that tour. His cassette was in the mail. I listened to it, recommended him, but it wasn't really that good, to tell you the truth. And a couple of years later, he called me and he said, hey, Sandy, I want you to be the drummer in this band. I found this girl, a great singer from Queens, New York. I signed her to a management deal, a record deal with Epic Portrait. Come down to the studio, come down to the record plant and hear some songs. So I went down to the record plant and the rest is history.
Because it was Cyndi Lauper.
That's correct.
And he was her manager by this time, right?
That's correct. He was a manager, and so I listened to some songs that we're working on, and I thought these songs are very catchy. And the first thing when I laid my eyes on Cyndi, I thought that she is not going to fly under the radar. The way she looks, and the way her catchy songs, and she was committed to her vision, the way she dressed, the way she wanted the band to sound, the way she wanted a band to dress, the way she wanted the stage to look. She had her whole thing all in order. So I said, man, this has got a good shot, because some of the songs were very catchy.
Yeah. Talk about the music industry itself. It seems to me it's become very fractured and very narrow, sort of nichified. Is it harder to break in now because of that it's so fractured?
Well, you know what? When the internet came into vogue in the 80s, well, the internet and drum machines, digital, when analog lent to digital, the whole music business changed. And in some ways, that's a blessing and a curse, because now if you have a keyboard and GarageBand in your Mac and a keyboard and a microphone, you could make a record in your living room. Yeah. You can get your songs up on Spotify. There is situations where you can pay them to get your songs on, X amount of streams or whatever. So it's very diluted now. The record business is very diluted to get your songs heard. It's easy to get your song out there, but there's trillions of songs out there. In the old days, it was like you needed a record deal. You had to be signed. In order to hear a record, you had to go to the radio or buy an album at the record store. The brick and mortar record stores, bye-bye. So it's a lot changed. Now, digital, technologically in the studio, it's helped things, because now there's drum machines, there's automation. So, if you have a drum machine track or a drummer playing with a drum machine or a click track or Pro Tools, then from one take to the next, the tempo is going to be the same. So it lends itself to quick editing. It's more cost effective for studio time. So there's a lot of advantages, but there are also a lot of disadvantages too.
What's your advice? What's your advice for someone who really wants to make it big and break in?
Well, just to keep writing. I mean, being that the odds are really great that your song is going to be heard by the person that should hear it to take you to the next level, you got to keep going, because you can't sit there and wish. You have to keep putting songs out there. Keep writing songs, because it only takes one to put you over the top or put you on the map of the music business. That's what I used to tell my students. It only takes one call. You might get turned down, or you might get your email might get deleted or whatever, but it only takes one. It doesn't take 50 calls for you to do something in the music business.
And it's all about relationships as well, right?
Exactly right. My saying, if you don't mind me saying so, my saying that I used to tell students is, keep throwing the what against the wall, and eventually
spaghetti
will stick. Yes, throw the spaghetti against the wall, and eventually something will stick there.
You've also written, you talked about writing music, but you've written a book. Talk about that. It's a memoir, right?
It's not a memoir. It's not a biography. I mean, I tell a lot of behind the scenes stories. I tell a lot of, interesting stories, but it all has to do with how you beat the odds in business and in life. And the acronym that I include in the book, and I speak about it at length individually, it's the acronym is called BEATS. Mm-hmm. And in addition to playing beats on a drum set for, over close to 60 years now, the acronym stands for, the B is belief, the E is enthusiasm, the A is attitude, the T is tenacity, and the S is service. Mm-hmm. So basically, I talk about you employing all those attributes in a positive way. And when you do that, there's an entity, a power greater than ourselves at work in our lives that are going to put opportunities in front of you that you had no idea existed. A simple 5-minute engagement with Dave in the Doorway led me to one of the biggest gigs in my career. And not only that, but November 23rd of 1984, during that Cyndi Lauper tour, which I wouldn't have got if I didn't engage with Dave in the Doorway. Mm-hmm. November 23rd, we played Charlotte, North Carolina. And backstage at that gig, I met the woman that is now upstairs being my wife and the mother of our child. Wow. So 40 years we're together. So sometimes I think, what makes happen. Sometimes the universe, the God energy, the higher power, whatever, if you work hard enough and you treat people right, it makes your goals and your what you want to do, like my picture on the bathroom mirror, made it come true. But sometimes the God energy puts things in your path, people in your path. When you engage them, it turns out to be you end up getting a situation back that you never existed, and that's how I got to be a speaker.
Let me ask you.
Go ahead.
I want to ask you a personal question, and we haven't rehearsed this or anything. Obviously, rock and roll has a reputation, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You were in that lifestyle, or at least that ambiance, for a long time. Did you succumb to it? Was there sort of a rock bottom situation, or were you always pretty stable and focused on where you wanted to go with your life?
Well, listen, during the 80s, it was a totally different musical climate than there is today. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I never got high or I never did a line or whatever. There were times where I did indulge in that, but my constitution always told me, hey, listen, when you got a 6 a.m. lobby call and it's 2 a.m. and there's partying going on in the hotel or whatever, you could have the mindset, well, there were people that I knew that just stood in that room until all the stuff was gone. Where I was able to say, I got a lobby call, I got to go, and I went to bed. And I never, ever, ever, ever did anything the whole day of the gig when I had to perform that night, or I had a rehearsal or a meeting or whatever. So I knew where to draw the line.
And it seems as though you didn't. It's like you didn't have the addiction gene, because there's some people who just can't turn the switch off.
That's correct. That's correct. And I knew some people. I know some people like that, and obviously they some of them didn't make it, and some of them did. They did the AA or the NA or the rehab thing or whatever. So, but when you grow up, you realize that is a dead end street. And one of the other reasons why I never really took anything like that on stage, before stage, is that when I did a great job on the drum set, I wanted it to be Sandy that did the great job, not being assisted by any kind of chemical or whatever. Or
exactly.
I never would understand, even to this day, why somebody would smoke a joint, a drummer would smoke a joint and then try to play a gig. How do you do that? Drumming is about being a clock, and that thought process. Am I speeding up? Am I slowing down? And you're playing in front of 20,000 people. Why do you want to risk that? Because it takes 20 years to build a great reputation, John. But it takes one bad gig for you to kill your whole reputation, and then you'd be going to Home Depot.
Yeah, exactly. Quick question from let's see. I wanted to, let's see. This is the one. Leah Noonan asks, intrigued by your book. Where will it be available? Is it already out? Let me just put it up on the screen again. And there we go.
Well, to answer her question, the book is available on Amazon as we speak. But if you want a signed copy of the book, go to my website and click. You'll see an opportunity. You'll see a prompt on my website. If you want a signed copy, click here, and then I will get it. You fill out the information, and I will personally send you a signed copy from my studio here. But if you just want it on Amazon, it's on Amazon. Just search "Beat the Odds" and Sandy Gennaro, and it'll come up.
And your web address is sandygennaro.com, and your contact information is sandy@sandygennaro.com. You've been very generous with your time, but I do want to ask a couple of more quick questions, if you don't mind. Hold on, let me just get you back up here so we can see you. What are all those records behind you?
Those are just little symbols of various tours that I've done. A bunch of that little five bunch record there behind my head. It looks
That
like
halo, that halo.
5 million. Cyndi Lauper's 5 million seller platinum. And then there's a couple of Joan Jett platinum records, a Joan Jett gold. There's a Monkees thing there. There's a couple of Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp acknowledgments. There's that pink one up above the 5 record. That is a personal gold platinum record and a gold 45. And that little plaque, that silver plaque beneath it, is Cyndi Lauper had that specially made for her management team, people that she was very close with at the label, and she gave the band, each member of the band, that one. And the little inscription at the bottom said, "Thank you so much. You couldn't have done it without me." Cyndi Lauper.
Before we wrap
I'm very
up,
happy to report. I'm very happy to report that Cyndi Lauper just was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Nice. I want to, just before we wrap up, talk about the transition to public speaking. We haven't really talked about that, but the thing that you talk to a lot of executives. There's a group called Vistage, which is basically CEOs mentoring CEOs, and who knew that a rock and roll drummer has anything to say to CEOs? But apparently, you've got something to say.
Well, this is an example of the universe, the God energy, working on your behalf, like the Wizard of Oz did behind the curtain, unbeknownst to you. I was 67 years old. What's that about? Like 8 years ago, something like that. In 2018, that was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
7 years ago, I was 66 years old, and I didn't know what I was going to do after I wanted to retire from the road and play, whatever. I had no idea. This is an example of the God energy putting an opportunity in front of you, but you got to take your blinders off to see it. And in my spirit of service to others, wanting to accommodate Dave in the doorway, wanting to accommodate this woman, 66, I played a concert in San Diego, California, and there was a handicapped woman in a wheelchair in the first row. And I said to myself, as we're playing the show, she's making like googly eyes at me and whatever, and whatever. And I said, she's going to get my drumstick, because I throw drumsticks out to the audience after a gig. And I threw a drumstick, and the guy next to her intercepted it. There was a fork in the road. I could have kept going, but I went back and I said, no, I want her to have it. He gave it to her. I replaced his. The next day, the husband of the woman in the wheelchair Facebook messaged me, "Hey, can I have your cell phone number? You threw a drumstick to my wife. I want to talk to you." I thought maybe I should call my lawyer.
Yeah, right.
But I engaged him. I gave him my number. Long story short, he says, "Thank you very much. My wife was totally moved by the fact that you threw her a drumstick. You picked her out. You made sure she had it. I'm coming to Nashville to speak. Can I meet you for a cup of coffee? I want to thank you in person." So there was another fork in the road. I could have turned them down and go, "No, I'm busy Saturday morning. Who wants to go downtown Broadway in Nashville at 10 o'clock on a Saturday?" Anyway, I engaged him. There's an engage people, meet people. It's about relationships. So I went downtown Nashville. He already thanked me on the phone. What is he going to thank me again for? Okay, I went downtown Nashville. He asked me how I told him the Dave in the Doorway story. He asked me how I got the gigs that I got, and invites me to his speaking gig that he was in Nashville for. He told the Dave in the Doorway story. He got a good response. He said, "Sandy, you should be a motivational speaker. You're used to speaking in front of people at the music school, whatever." He says, "But corporate America needs to hear this story." This gentleman, his name is Michael Pierce, the husband of the woman in the wheelchair. He goes by the Vistage name of Antarctic Mike. Every time he came to Nashville to speak for Vistage, he used to invite me to his engagements. I met some Vistage chairs. One thing led to the other, and I started speaking for Rotary clubs, doing these little 20-minute things, chambers of commerces or whatever. And then finally, I got the to apply for Vistage, and I did, and I became a Vistage speaker. And the Vistage gig, because I'm speaking in front of CEOs, they want me to speak to their company or their conference or their whatever. So Vistage thing has been really like a springboard to other big big gigs, big speaking gigs, conferences, whatever. So, but it all comes back. I want to make this perfectly clear. It all comes back of me wanting to put a smile on that woman's face.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
things happen, magical things happen. And now I have another career. And I go to bed at night, John, thinking that I spend 58 years in the music business, touring and recording, to set me up for what I'm doing in the last chapter of my life. I have a new business now.
Yeah.
So go figure.
One of the things you talk about is that you make the comparison between running a company and keeping a band together. And one of the questions I've got is, I've always felt that the Beatles really could have stayed together if they had allowed each other to have their solo careers, but then to come together as a group as well. It need not have been a binary either or. Do you have any insights on what the Beatles could have done differently to preserve what they had?
Well, you know what? I don't think the idea of doing a solo thing or wanting to do a solo project outside the Beatles had any effect on their breaking up. I think, and from my opinion, and from books I've read, the fact that Brian Epstein, their original manager that made them what they were, basically, he's the one that decided to put them in suits instead of leather jackets, and et cetera, and the songwriting and all of that. It was after he passed away. Basically, it was the Beatles were a boat without a rudder. Mm-hmm. So, Paul wanted Linda's husband or Linda's father, John Eastman, to manage the band. John Lennon wanted Alan Klein to manage the band, who managed the Stones, and there was a difference there. So that was the seed of the separation between Paul and John. Yeah. And so I think that was the major. I think if Brian Epstein didn't pass away, mm-hmm. I think it would have been a totally different outcome, and they probably would have morphed into doing solo projects. That's no reason why bands break up. Mm-hmm. It could be, but it doesn't have to be.
Sometimes it's what you're describing is a power thing, but that's also true in corporations.
That's correct.
And so, is there any lesson from the Beatle experience that you're able to bring to corporate America in your talks?
Well, from the Beatle experience, I can only bring the similarity between a drummer and a CEO. The drummer and the guitar players out there that are listening to this, and the keyboard players, whatever, say what you want, but the drummer is the most important person in the band, bar none. So a CEO is the most important person and a drummer is there to serve the other musicians, to perform, to form a foundation, a musical foundation for the other players to play on top of, because the drummer is the foundation of the house. And the house goes as the strength of the foundation. The band goes as the strength and the consistency of the drummer, and the company goes the strength and the consistency and the leadership of the CEO. So in my talk, I highlight a few similarities between a CEO and a drummer in a rock and roll band.
So what question have I not asked that you'd like to address? Or do you want to go up and feed the dog now?
I got to go up and feed my dog Angus. He's hungry now. I think my wife was taking care of that. My wife Sherry is taking care of that tonight, but it's usually my gig. But what would you like to have for dinner tonight, Sandy? But I have a question for you, John. What is your next step? What is your next step in your life?
Whoa, that's a great question. Well, I mean, there was a transition because I was a journalist for 45 years, 25 at CNN, and when they made me an editor at CNN in the early 90s, it was not creative. It was tedious, but it paid well. And so I needed a creative outlet, and that's when I started writing novels. But it took 10 years for me to get the first novel published. And by the time I left CNN in 2013, my third book was coming out. And by this time, I was a manuscript editor, a writing coach. I was a writing teacher. And so, we all have that dark night of the soul of, can I make it on the outside? Because It was not fun anymore for any number of reasons. And when I made the decision to leave, I basically had a second career to glide into. And so I've expanded that. But now I'm at a point, the next step, I've written a memoir that's sitting with a publisher. They're trying to decide whether to publish it. I'm working on my 7th book, but I'm also expanding the net. And I'm also hoping to be able to do more public speaking, keynotes, in-depth writing workshops for more than just writing conferences. And I don't want to minimize writing conferences because that's where I found my agent. But they're probably the key motivation that I've got is encouragement. And the kind of the keynote talk that I give is I inspire people who are struggling with grief to use writing as a way to heal. Because we all have pain and loss in our lives. But I found in my experience from the losses I've had that writing is a catharsis and it's transformative in terms of bringing you inner clarity and being able to help and encourage other people. So the next step is to keep doing what I'm doing, but hopefully reaching more people. Does that answer your question? Do you have a follow-up,
Yes,
Mr. President?
You know what? I find that when you just said writing, when you're in a period of grief, writing is very cathartic. Is that the right
Cathartic. Yeah. It's emotional. It's an emotional release.
When my mother passed away in 2001, I was asked by my family to write the eulogy.
Yeah.
When my oldest sister, Natalie, just passed away, it's about a year ago now.
It's still fresh.
It's still very fresh. I was asked to write the eulogy for my sister. So I'm like a family member who writes the eulogy for family members that pass or whatever. And I found that to be true because, the paper or the computer. In my mother's case in 2001, the paper was drenched with my tears, and and last year my computer was getting tears. So anyway, so I found both situations to be very cathartic. Like in other words, because when I was writing it, I said, how am I going to stand up in church with my sister there in the urn and talking about my sister? What all positive, uplifting things, aspects of my sister's personality, the little anecdotes, little jokes that she used to say that people that knew her would resonate, And I said to myself, how am I going to say that and not break down? But you know what? When I got up there, when my name was called or whatever, I got up there and it was like a release. It was like a release, and I felt different after I gave the eulogy than before.
How did you feel? What was the difference? The difference
was it was more of an acceptance. Like in other words, because the eulogy highlighted positives in my sister's life, I didn't dwell on the negative. I didn't have that picture in my mind of her in hospice. Or with my mother, I didn't have the picture in my mind of her in the nursing home in the last days. From that point on, I just listened and thought about the positives because all of the positives was fresh because I highlighted the positives in my eulogy. So that was the difference where now I think of my sister and I think about, I miss her and the void never goes away. The void never gets filled. But you realize that they're in a place better than where we are. And all you got to do is watch the news. And would you rather be on Earth or would you rather be in paradise? Let me ask you that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I guess what you're saying is that the actual act of writing brought emotional release and comfort, I guess.
Yes, because it forced my mind to focus on the positive of the person's life as opposed to the bad memories of the sickness or whatever.
Do you see yourself doing any more of this kind of writing? Obviously, let's hope there are no more eulogies that you have to write, but has this made any kind of a transition into embedding itself into your daily life, writing and
Not really. I mean, I suppose there'll be another book in the pipeline eventually, but it's not going to be about a cathartic thing. It'll be, I don't know what the subject matter would be. I was thinking about writing about the similarities between a drummer and a CEO, whatever. But it's not going to be a biography. If I do any more writing, it's not, you know. I just may do another kind of personal / business book, like the Beat the Odds book, you know. But
you've written a book about rudiments and stuff too, right?
I've written several books. I have an instructional video called Drum Basics that's on YouTube now. And I've written a couple, being associated with the school in New York City, the Collective. I've written some contemporary styles for rock drumming. I wrote 2 books about drumming and instructional reading music and whatever like that.
Okay. Well, listen, I should let you go, but before I do, I'm going to just put your contact information on. SandyGennaro.com is your website. All kinds of clips on there of you playing with Joan Jett and Cyndi Lauper and Bo Diddley and doing Stump the Band with Johnny Carson. And if they want to get in touch with you directly, if they want to bypass the website, sandy@sandygennaro.com. I'm John DeDakis. You've been one-to-one with me. That's my website, johndedakis.com. And we've been one-to-one with Sandy Gennaro, rock and roll drummer and public speaker. Sandy, thank you so much. I hope we get a chance to meet in person sometime.
I appreciate it, John. Anytime you find yourself in Nashville, reach out to me in advance and we'll have a coffee.
I will see you this summer, probably. I'll be there for Killer Nashville, the writing conference. So awesome. Let's try to get together.
Awesome.
Take care, man.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Bye.